Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Anthony's Journey. So today we're going to be talking about the events of 2022, which is effectively when I started actually my journey back in the private sector from going from a consultant now back to working with electric AI. So, I actually in my last episode mentioned that I did quite a few things. So, I acquired a new house. I implemented a brand new system for my client at the time, and I also changed jobs as well. So I signed an offer letter and I started to work with electric AI. So yeah, as we started the 2022 year, the first thing, one of the tasks that I actually had to do, working with my client now, was not just implementing NetSuite, but also helping them get through their audit. So one of the first things that came to mind was that I actually had to get everything in order. So with the implementation of NetSuite, there was a brand new slew of things that actually occurred. So NetSuite has something called the ARM module, which is basically just like a revenue recognition module, which basically tells you how much sales and how much deferred revenue, you have in the system. So as I started to work through, the numbers, and I started to realize that there was something off about the numbers. So I dug deep and I said, wow. So even though, everything was pretty much automated in terms of like invoicing, in terms of like, the revenue was being recognized every month, at least, per the module, I did realize that the module wasn't as efficient in terms of understanding like more complex concepts. So we actually had a few different types of revenue recognition models here at Electric. One of the revenue recognition models was one-time recognition, or point in time, which is what AS6606 mentions. And basically what that means is that you recognize revenue or sales at a point in time. So essentially it's either when the sale is made or when the services are completed. All of these aspects actually say point in time recognition is usually appropriate. And then we also had something called recurring revenue recognition, which basically is similar to like your Netflixes, where you would recognize revenue over time, usually every month as your services are completed. So yeah, we had that kind of recognition. And we also had something called kind of like a usage recognition. So essentially, as the customer had more usage, then we would have to update how much the customer used within a month and then bill them for it. So we had quite a few different models here at Electric. So this kind of caused a few issues with the revenue recognition model. So whenever I would usually clean up the month, for most cases for revenue recognition, I would actually see that when I redid my work compared to the module, there would be sometimes a difference between 30,000 to 100,000. So sometimes I would have to, let my controller know and say like, hey, I'm noticing that the module actually is not working as intended. So yeah, I think we might need to kind of redo the thing from scratch. So, we'll have the module kind of run, of course, but then I myself will probably have to check everything every month. So to be honest with you guys, the check was not an easy thing overall. It actually took a pretty heavy toll on my mind. It's funny. I talk a lot about this in my channel, where like, accounting is a lot of work. And, it's funny because I'm looking back on it now, I feel like it is, depending on the company that you go to, in most cases, you will be forced to work quite a bit of work, quite a bit hard, because in most cases you're going to be very short-staffed. So especially in this company was no different. I was the only revenue accountant in the entire company. So essentially I was the one in charge of everything revenue related. So, I didn't really have anyone that would report to me to help me with like, anything revenue related. I would have temporary help from time to time from like the senior accountant or from like my other peers, but I never had like any permanent hires that would actually be helping me throughout the month end close process, throughout the like the audit items, through writing the memo, writing the SS606 memo, through checking my schedules, all of these items were essentially falling. They fell on me. So as I continued down this path of understanding myself and really understanding like if this is what I wanted, like was electric the right fit for me. I actually was working really crazy hours. I think I was working, to be honest, I was working 14-hour shifts to kind of get everything completed. And I did this for roughly 5 months straight. So I was working 14-hour shifts daily. I was, just, grinding myself to dust, as they say, like just kind of working myself ragged. As I was thinking about my life at that moment, I was wondering if this was it. Is this the end of my journey? Am I going to continue to just work myself ragged and continue to persevere? And the funny thing was, I wasn't really earning overtime anymore because I was no longer a consultant. So all of these hours that I was pumping into my company were all effectively free hours. So I was sometimes giving my company 50 to 60 hours just to keep the ship afloat because there was just so much moving pieces going on, so many things that had to be checked, hundreds of contracts to be reviewed monthly. It was such a tough thing to just automate because NetSuite's R module just wasn't up to the task to keep things exactly how I needed them. And we explored many avenues. There was actually a module in NetSuite called Analytics, which essentially analyzes. You could actually analyzes like a data set that you put into it, and you can actually do something called pivot tables. You could do Excel spreadsheets effectively. It's a very advanced tool that I tried to use for my purposes, but even then it fell short of this particular need that I needed. So so I continued to work. I wasn't just working through. I wasn't just working 14 hours a day on Monday through Friday and Saturday, Sunday during normal weeks, but I was also working these times during like my Thanksgiving break, my Christmas break, New Year's. I was working around the clock. I would not take a single day off in most cases just because there's just so much to do and so many things to accomplish and tight deadlines. So it was overall a hectic time for me. And as I started to think about it, I was like, I don't know if electric AI was the right fit for me. Even though I just started, it just felt like it was a lot of work. And even though my compensation was a lot better than before, it wasn't really. I didn't feel like it was worth it because of the amount of hours that I was sometimes pumping in sometimes 80 to 90 hours a week. And I personally don't think that's uncommon in the accounting industry. In the accounting industry, I think sometimes that's just actually the norm. Whether you're working at a public company, working at a private company, I think that's just the life we live in as an accountant.
Hello everyone, my name is Anthony and I'm the host of TheLostSanctuary. I hope you've been enjoying our content so far, and if you have, please feel free to like and subscribe. Also, we have our website up here, and we also have some socials down here, and as always, leave your comments down below.
So to kind of get my mind off of things, I actually started to focus more on, like the new house that I just bought in Roscoe, New York. I started to actually work more closely with my contractor, and we started to actually, start building the foundation, for example. We started to work more on the interior, and this kind of thing actually brought more joy to my life than sometimes even accounting did, funny enough, because, it was something different, something outside the office, and something that really made it seem that I was making a difference in the sense of like, building something. So even though accounting is a great field, I think something that I was lacking was like the connection, the human connection. In most cases, I was kind of like just on my own. I was kind of just grinding away in spreadsheets and memos, and I felt like the human connection was lost. And of course, I would meet with my manager weekly, but it just wasn't enough of a human connection. I just didn't feel that connected to my peers, and plus, and during this time, we were working through, working from home because of COVID. So I think that added more to my, just my mental state where I was kind of starting to feel burnt out overall, and I don't know. It was a rough time overall. I started to actually get more irritable. I started to just be more of a workaholic. I would work from sometimes from like 8 a.m. to like 11 p.m. and it was something that I never really understood why I did that at the time. At the time, I felt like it was kind of like what needed to happen, and in most cases, I don't feel like every accountant actually does that. Well, at least in the company that I was in, I feel like most accountants didn't really work past the 40-hour mark. So as soon as the 40-hour mark kind of set, they kind of left. But I was the type of accountant who felt that, even though, I try to do my work within the 40-hour week, it just was a lot of work to get done. Especially since I was kind of soloing that division, the revenue accounting division. So, as I started to kind of bounce between my job and kind of the construction, I kind of had to use the construction that I was doing with the new house as a means of escape. And sometimes that's what you need. You need an escape from your job, because sometimes your job can consume you and you can become a shell of your former self, which I saw myself becoming in 2022. I felt myself kind of working myself so hard that I didn't even have like a thought process at some point. Sometimes I would just be like a zombie. And then I realized that, it's not just, at that time I realized that maybe work is the be all end all. Like, it's funny because there's phrases like, you live to work or you work to live. These are two very common phrases that people toss out nowadays, and I felt like my I was actually living to work. That's what I was. I wasn't really working to live. I was pretty just completely consumed by everything, and I was effectively like non-existent in my household. I was just like in my desk all day, and it actually takes a toll after a while. Working all those hours in front of a computer screen. So it's important to really realize that don't sacrifice everything. Think about like the ones you love. Think about moving forward from things, because there are things that you lose along the way as you continue to work these hours. So something that I noticed that I've lost was the connection with my friends, the connection with my family, even with my own pet. I hardly even stayed with my dog, with my parents. I didn't see my parents much, and even my friends, I was non-existent. Whether it was like, even if I wanted to do like a Zoom call, I just didn't feel like it after like a long day of work. So it was overall, one thing that I would say is, don't do the same mistake I did of working so much, because there comes a point in time where effectively you start to lose things that you hold dear. So some of the things that I lost was not just the connections that I have with my family, my friends, and my dog, but I was also starting to lose things that I never thought that I would even think about. Like things like I started to effectively starting to lose like my eyesight, because of being on a computer screen so much. I started to have back issues. So all of these aspects of working yourself too hard can have negative repercussions on not just your relationships in life, but also on your health. So it's important to acknowledge that you should step away from this and actually run away from these kinds of environments that are overworking you just because they feel like they can. So and it's sometimes it's a very amazing thing to really want to step away from this and just run away from these kinds of environments, because sometimes, even though you sometimes kind of like say that you're doing all these things, because I've actually told that to my manager and things like that, sometimes they say like, well, you shouldn't do that, but then they'll offer an alternative to like, hey, like we're going to get you more help, we're going to get you this, we're going to get you that, and sometimes even the help that they provide isn't enough to compensate for all the work that you actually need to do. And when you're presented with, when you kind of present the, hey, this is what needs to be done, and people just kind of reject it, then that's also a tough blow that sometimes I was dealt while I was working at Electric AI as well. So yeah, I think so kind of wrapping up the year of 2022, I was going into my performance review and I wasn't really sure what was gonna come about it as I worked all this time. I was hoping that hopefully I'll get promoted to revenue accounting manager for all the hard work, but we'll talk a little bit more about that next week. And yeah, this concludes Anthony's Journey, episode 15. Alrighty, so I hope everyone has a great day, and adios.
Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing an amazing job, and I'm wishing everyone out there all the best. All right, until next time, adios.